Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me. I'm Jill Bloom, Group Publisher of Roofing Contractor, and welcome to our Best of Success podcast show. It's always an honor to have Trent Cotney partner with Adams and Reese. Trent, thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, Jill, it's great to be here.
Well, Trent, sounds like we've got a lot to talk about with just one very specific topic. And it sounds like there was a final ruling in the independent contractor uh, status. What is going on? What does everybody need to know?
Yeah, so this just came out a couple days ago, and is big news. Obviously, we've been talking about the Department of Labor's analysis of what makes an independent contractor an independent contractor. And the reason why this is important for construction, just to give some background for our listeners, is that if you hire a subcontractor, there's an analysis that has to go on to determine whether or not you are entitled to pay them 1099 or you need to, withhold payroll taxes as a W-2 employee. And that analysis, has changed over the years. The most recent version was from 2021. And this rulemaking process had been in place for quite a few months now. So the ruling finally came out a couple of days ago. And what it did is rescinded the prior rule, and it adopted a new 6-factor test. Okay, and I'm going to go through those 6 factors briefly. The first is, they're going to look at the opportunity for profit and loss. They're going to look to see whether or not your subcontractor or your independent contractor has to be concerned about its own ability to run its business, or if it's, entirely dependent on how you do with regard to a project or whatever it might be. The second factor is the investments in the workers and the employees of that entity. So is a subcontractor, for example, are they investing in training? Are they investing in, safety materials and guidelines? Do they look like a business? Are they operating like a business? That's a factor that they're going to look at. Okay. The third is the degree of permanence of the relationship. So what that means is if you only have one subcontractor crew and they only work for you and they don't work for anybody else and they don't market and they don't advertise and they wear your gear, they're really your employees. You're just not paying them right. And what that means is you're not doing payroll tax. You're probably not keeping I-9s. There might be insurance related issues. There might be benefits related issues. All those types of things come into play. So fourth factor is the nature and degree of the control over the work. So if you dictate exactly what your sub does day in and day out, or even like an independent salesperson, if you tell them what to do and day in and day out, and you control every aspect of their job, then that's a factor that they look at to consider whether or not they're an employee rather than an independent contractor. This is a key factor that I think is important. And, this is the one that I had watched most closely. It deals with whether or not the work performed by a sub or an independent contractor is an integral part of the job. And this tracks a lot of what California is doing with their ABC test. Okay. So for example, if you do nothing but put on shingles on, steep slope roof systems, if you have a sub crew that does sub labor and they do tear off and dry in and then put on the roof, they're basically doing the same thing that your business does. That is looked at differently than, let's say, specialization, right? If it's someone that, let's say you hire a crew to put on copper finials, which is not something that you normally do. Clearly, that's different. So they're looking at that to see, is this part of your operations? You're just subcontracting it out, or is this something completely different that requires specialization? And then the last one is they're looking for the skill or initiative that subcontractor or independent contractor has. Are they working? Do they exhibit professionalism? Are they working towards mastering their craft, or is it just a plug and play crew that you use to operate, on a daily basis? All these factors are looked at, and there's not one that's weighed heavier than the other. This is a change as well. They're looking at what's known as a totality of the circumstances approach. What does this mean? This means that it is, it is fact intensive and it is very gray. There is no black or white. So, Joe, we've talked about it plenty of times. This requires kind of going back, making sure you're looking at your subcontract agreements, your independent contractor agreements, your policies, your procedures, because this is a little bit of a change, right? And I could see greater enforcement coming out of this.
So how are they gonna enforce that, Trent? What is it? Are OSHA people gonna show up to the job site and they start asking questions, or are they gonna show up to their offices, or we don't know?
Sure. So keep in mind, this is a Department of Labor. There are two sides of the Department of Labor. There is OSHA, which, deals with safety. And then there is, wage and hour, which is what this would fall under, right?
Okay,
And the way that it comes up, the Department of Labor, the when I look at the verbiage behind why this was put into place, a lot of it had to do with sort of the gig economy, right? The Uber drivers, the DoorDash, that kind of stuff. But there has been some commentary to focus more on construction and hospitality. So I could anticipate that there may be some, raids that happen or audits that happen as a result. But I will tell you, in my experience, the majority of Department of Labor audits that occur, either because there's a disgruntled employee, there's a former disgruntled employee, or there's a competitor. And I don't think they are staffed highly enough to start, patrolling the streets in cars looking for stuff. I don't think it's going to be like that, but I do think it will be much harder to defend a misclassification claim based on this analysis. It's shifted more towards, being pro-employee, which is exactly what we've seen from the Biden administration. Almost from every single regulation, it's been pro-union, pro-employee, and this is indicative of that.
got it. So really then it sounds like the owner's gonna get some sort of phone call then, more than likely, rather than somebody showing up on a job site asking questions.
Yeah, that is the more likely outcome is a complaint is filed. I'll give you a few examples of what I see in the real world, right? You've got
Okay.
a sub crew on a job. Let's say they're, doing drywall or doing, roofing or whatever it might be, right? One of the employees of that sub crew falls and gets hurt, and makes a claim, but that sub crew doesn't have insurance. So they go to a bad guy lawyer, a contingency lawyer, and say, hey, what can I do? That lawyer says, you know what, let's go after and say, look, you're really their employee. They're just not paying you correctly. Let's look at that and see what's there. And then that may,
Got it.
result in a DOL audit and then, litigation and all that good stuff. So that's a common occurrence.
So it's hard to even talk about how do they prepare for this because it's so gray.
I think a lot of this, it wasn't like it was necessarily black and white before. I think the difference now is that, it's moving more towards the employee side than it was before. So I think the same advice I would have given before this rule is the same advice I would give now, which is how you operate is incredibly important. You need policies and procedures in place. You need to onboard subs correctly. You need to make sure that the documentation reflects, what the real world circumstances are. And you need to be smart. You got to have situational awareness. Your sub crew shouldn't be wearing your gear. You should, do whatever you can to operationally backfill the paperwork to show that there's independence, right? Because if there is independence, you need to be able to show that in writing. So I don't think the analysis, or recommendations that we have necessarily changed. They may need to be tweaked because there is some very specific guidance that the Department of Labor provided within this. But overall, 35,000 foot view, it's the same analysis.
Okay, well, more to come, I'm sure, right? Wait till we see
Absolutely.
an opportunity where we have a few more options, but
Yeah.
nothing making it more confusing. So I guess you've always said the person with the best paper trail wins.
Yeah, and for our listeners, obviously very complex topic. I'm putting together an article that I will get over to you, Jill, and then you can publish that as well if you want it. It's going to go into a little bit more detail about some of these things
Yeah.
to help our listeners understand better.
Yeah, sounds great. Well, Trent, as always, thank you so much for all the great insight. And if anybody has any questions, how do they touch base with you?
Sure. You can email me at trent.cotney@arlaw.com or check me out on social at Trent Cotney.
Sounds great. And if anybody has any questions for us, it's roofingcontractor.com or wconline.com. And while you're there, make sure you sign up for all our free content. Follow us on all our social media channels so you can stay up to date on all the great interviews we're doing, especially the legal insights with Trent Cotney. But most importantly, stay safe and healthy, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks again, Trent.
Thank you.